Hey there riders, Moto Journo Kris here today. I wanted to talk ergonomics on the Norden 901 from Husqvarna. I've very kindly been lent the bike for the day by Moto Hub, and I've been able to do a little bit of road, a little bit of kind of fire trail-ish stuff, unsealed road, with some kind of more gnarly, sections, mainly gravel, pretty hard pack, so nothing too challenging. But I thought I'd give you my thoughts on the ergonomics of this particular bike. 204 kilos dry, so probably 220, 225 wet. That is on the heftier side, but not for this class of bike, not for the middle weight adventure bikes. And certainly while this is a large bike, as you can see here, there could be nothing more different once you jump on, because that just isn't something you feel. So I'm on a bit of an incline here, so I'm being careful to keep the bike weighted that way. But hopefully you can see, nice seat to peg ratio, quite a comfortable seat. It's got a decent density to it as well. I'd be interested to see how it felt after 8 hours riding, as opposed to say 3 or 4, but certainly the peg to seat ratio is good. It's easy to get your weight through those pegs. I was weighting the pegs through the corners on the road easily, and then the reach to the bars, nice and natural. Great vision of the dash, great vision through the mirrors. Fairly simple switch blocks. Just your starter on the right switch block. Then you've got your little toggles for your dash on the left, alongside your indicators, horn, a cruise control switch, which is nice, and a flasher, so nice and simple. There is a 12-volt connector just there, so that is something to keep in mind. And you've got a nice bit of wind protection as well. There's decent adjustability in those mirrors. Being round, I find the vision directly behind you is not great, but I was able to adjust them so that I had enough vision that I wouldn't be replacing them necessarily. So just sitting on the bike, it's upright. It's quite a natural seating position. The bars are a little bit closer than you might expect to your body. And as you can see here, there's only a short-ish extent of that tank in front of you, which is partially because the tanks are down below, which lowers the weight. And not only does it centralize the weight, but the weight being so low means the bike feels less like a 900 and more like a 600 or a 500 or a 400. It is an exceptionally light machine as far as the feeling. Rolling it around, perhaps not quite so much, but jumping on this bike, if I didn't know what I was jumping on blind, I'd probably think it was like a little 500 or something like that, just because of the weight and the way it carries that weight and the agility and the ease of use. So if you're afraid of a bigger, heavier bike, don't be. I'm a 32-inch inseam, 180 centimeters. I'm on the longer leg side. I can get a foot down, 1 foot down easily, and this seat is in the lower 854 millimeter seat height, and you can add 20 mils to that within the stock adjustability. So you've got a bit of room to play with there. And I'd say 854 millimeters on an adventure bike with 250 mils of ground clearance, that's quite a low seat height and quite inviting to people. Obviously, if you're significantly shorter, you may still struggle with the machine and only be getting a toe down. I'm just wearing my road boots today, and my city adventure boots would add a good bit of, good extra 15 mil or so, which would make it even easier to get my feet down. So standing up on the bike, I guess, is really important. I was blown away by how good the adventure of this bike, basically I can stand up and I can grasp onto that seat with my knees. My weight is down straight through the pegs. There's no weight on the bars, which you don't want, obviously, and it's just such an easy thing to ride. There is a steering damper down in there, and so one thing I will note is that it's not a twitchy bike on the front end. It's got a really nice, stable, quite solid feel on the front end on the road, and on the gravel and in a bit of sand and stuff like that. There is traction control and ABS, of course, both cornering, so you do have some safety features there if you're a little bit worried about that kind of thing. But generally speaking, I've just been blown away by this bike, and the ergonomics have certainly fit me perfectly. As far as the adjustability on the bike, we do have the WP Apex suspension front and rear. On the rear, it's only preload and rebound adjustability. On the front, fully adjustable. And I guess it's worth noting that the overall suspension on this it's an interesting mix. It's quite supple. At low speeds on the road, you do feel kind of that softness a little bit more, but once you're riding the bike a little bit harder, it's beautiful. Very, very well sprung. and certainly super impressed with the suspension setup for me at 75 kilos, and I'd be very happy adjusting within the stock kind of adjustment range of this suspension system. So overall, if you've seen my review, will have seen there, I've been blown away by this bike. I just think it is absolutely exceptional. It feels like a smaller bike. The ergonomics are quite inviting for a bigger adventure bike. Obviously, it's not like one of the 1200s, but this thing's an absolute weapon, road, off-road, and check out my full review if you haven't seen it yet. But if you're considering one of these and you're a smaller rider, I'd definitely go and sit on one, see what you think, and hopefully go for a test ride if you can manage it, because I think you'll find this bike significantly easier to ride than you may imagine, which if you're a little bit worried about jumping on an adventure bike, this may be the bike that will do it for you without going, down to say a 390 Adventure or a CB500X or a Versys X. If you want the full-size bike and the full power bike, check out one of these. Anyway, and one thing I should mention is obviously we've got quite a wide and long pillion seat on the back here, as well as a pretty decent stretch to those pegs for the pillion. Perhaps not quite as big a stretch as for the main rider, but I would certainly say a strength of this bike with the grab rails and room for a top box is that there's really good pillion viability on this machine. And while I don't have a pillion with me today, unfortunately, that is something which also really stands out for me on this bike. A few other little points to mention. I did find there was some heat buildup on the bike in the more suburban conditions on the way back into town on a warm afternoon in regular riding jeans and tall boots, and with a sizable collector under the bike bottling things up, there's no doubt a contribution there to that. I wasn't being burnt, but I wonder how the bike would be on a 40-degree day, which is quite common here in Australia in summer. The screen is non-adjustable, although I believe you can fit a taller unit. However, obviously making adjustments on the run is not possible as a result. There is an external preload adjuster for the rear shock, which is something I always look for, but the adjustability on that rear shock is a little bit more limited than we've seen on the Adventure R from KTM. Cruise control is standard on this model, as is the quick shifter, which is two very nice quality of life features. There's an Explorer mode available for a few $100 extra as well if you're interested in mucking around in those electronics to a greater extent, and sadly the heated grips are not standard. The stock protectors seen on the bike here are also plastic, so good for wind protection but minimal actual protection in a drop or crash. Also, a quick reminder, I'm 180 centimeters and I have a 32-inch inseam. For comparison, the Norden 901 seat height is adjustable between 854mm and 874mm, or 33.6 inches or 34.4 inches. Thanks for watching the video. If you've got any questions at all about the Norden 901 as far as ergonomics, just let me know down below in the comments. As always, stay safe out there. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.